Somewhere in a bathroom cabinet right now, there's a small bottle or comb-through cream that darkens gray hair a little more every time you use it. For decades, one of the most common versions of that product contained a genuine neurotoxin, one the United States government approved for exactly this use in 1980, banned in 2018, and then, after the manufacturer objected, quietly let back into limbo for 3 more years. The idea itself is much older than any modern bottle. The Romans, and possibly the Greeks before them, discovered that dragging a comb made of lead through your hair, after dipping it in vinegar, gradually turned gray hair dark. Modern researchers using electron microscopes finally figured out why, centuries later, the lead reacts with sulfur naturally present in hair's own proteins, forming microscopic crystals of lead sulfide, embedding themselves inside individual strands. It's a slow chemical staining process, not a dye in the modern sense, and one research team studying it in the 2000s described the ancient recipe, quite literally, as an early form of nanotechnology. The lead scientist on that project noted something else, almost in passing. The modern product, built on the exact same underlying chemistry, already had a name: Grecian formula. Nobody in antiquity understood why it worked. They just knew that it did, and that gray hair, widely read at the time as a visible marker of age and declining status, could be quietly, gradually erased. That basic chemistry barely changed for almost 2,000 years. By the 1800s, it had simply moved from a comb dipped in vinegar to a bottled commercial product, a hair restorer or hair tonic, sold under brand names, promising the same gradual darkening with none of the ritual. In 1872, an American medical journal published a case report with a plain, clinical title, "A Case of Lead Poisoning Following the Use of a Hair Preparation." It wasn't an isolated curiosity. That same era, the New York Board of Health commissioned chemist C.F. Chandler to test the hair tonics flooding the market. Of the 16 brands he analyzed, 15 contained lead. Doctors writing about the symptoms described exactly what you'd expect from lead poisoning: nerve damage, muscle paralysis, and a specific, recognizable symptom called wrist drop, where the wrist simply stops responding. Because the disease didn't always show the telltale gum discoloration doctors expected, some cases were misdiagnosed as rheumatism entirely, while the actual cause sat on a bathroom shelf. If you enjoy digging into the hidden history behind ordinary products like this, it's worth sticking around and subscribing. There's usually a new one within the week. You might expect that once doctors understood this, the product would simply disappear. It didn't. It just kept being reformulated and resold, generation after generation, because gradual, low-effort gray hair coverage was something people genuinely wanted, and lead acetate reliably delivered it. In 1962, an American company called Comb launched a specific version aimed at men, under a name that would eventually become synonymous with the entire category: Grecian formula. The formula itself was almost entirely water, well over 90%, with a small measured fraction well under 1% of lead acetate doing the actual work, reacting with the hair's own sulfur, exactly as the Roman recipe once had. Its 1980s television commercials leaned directly into the product's slow, undetectable action, promising that gray would disappear slowly, gradually, and no one is noticing. The company created, more or less on its own, the modern market for gradual men's hair darkening products, and within a few decades, controlled more than 70% of it. A second brand, Youth Air, used the same active ingredient and quietly captured much of what remained, including for 2 full decades a retired civil servant named Richard Gandolf, who used it faithfully because, as he later put it, he simply didn't like going gray. Then comes the part of this story that should genuinely surprise you. In 1980, the United States Food and Drug Administration formally approved lead acetate as an ingredient in these products, based on a study of the era that concluded the amount absorbed through the scalp was insignificant. The FDA later acknowledged real problems with that original study, and separately noted that overall blood lead levels in the American population had dropped so significantly since 1980 that the old assumption that a little extra lead from a hair product barely mattered no longer held up. Regulators in Canada and the European Union reached the opposite conclusion much earlier, banning lead acetate from hair products by the mid-2000s. The United States did not follow. For roughly 3 more decades, one of the only places on Earth where you could still legally buy a lead-based hair product was the American market that had approved it in the first place. By then, health authorities had already settled a related question that undercut the entire 1980 approval. The Centers for Disease Control stated plainly that there is no safe exposure level for lead, of any kind, for anyone. Researchers had also found that lead from these products didn't stay confined to the user's own scalp. Testing found household surfaces touched after use, including combs, blow dryers, and bathroom faucets, carrying as much as 28.4 micrograms of lead per square foot, more than 70 times the level the EPA considers hazardous for a child's environment. In 2014, a medical journal documented a man who'd used the product on his beard rather than his scalp and developed numbness and tingling in both hands and feet that lasted 7 months. A year later, in 2015, the FDA itself received a case report of a 66-year-old man who developed metal poisoning and high blood pressure after using Grecian formula exactly as directed. 2 years later, environmental and public health organizations formally petitioned the agency to finally ban the ingredient. In 2018, the FDA agreed, revoking its own 38-year-old approval. That should have been the end of it. It wasn't. The ban was set to take effect on December 3, 2018. On November 30th, 3 days before the deadline, Comb, the company still manufacturing Grecian formula, formally requested a hearing to challenge the decision, insisting the product was safe. That single request was enough to pause the ban entirely while the FDA reviewed it. The product that had already been ruled unsafe stayed on shelves for 3 additional years, while the paperwork worked itself out. The ban was finally reinstated in 2021, taking full effect in 2022, with enforcement beginning in 2023. Today, the same brand names are still sold, reformulated with bismuth citrate instead of lead. The bottle looks almost identical. The gradual darkening effect works almost the same way. Bismuth reacts with hair's sulfur through a similar chemical process, but unlike lead, it isn't readily absorbed through skin, and it doesn't accumulate in the body over years of repeated use. What's actually missing from the formula took a Roman-era trick, an 1870s government chemist, a 1980 regulatory approval that aged badly, and one company's own formal objection to a ban already ruled justified. A genuinely strange combination of ancient habit and modern bureaucracy, just to remove a single toxic ingredient from something people already knew, more than a century earlier, was dangerous.